Whew. Well, here we are. Die Rise. So I want you to imagine it's January of 2013 and you've been playing nothing but Transit for 3 months straight. That's it. That's all the context you need. So, welcome back to Zombies Retrospective. Today we're looking at Die Rise, a map that has always managed to dodge criticism by hiding behind the monumentally disastrous shadow of Transit. Today, however, we aim to tear that wall down. And before we do get into it, I also just want to mention that I actually started a second channel. It would mean the world to myself and Roman if you guys could go check it out and subscribe. Top link in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. I feel so indifferent towards Die Rise that I'm not even really excited to tear this one down. It's something that I have to do, but I'm not looking forward to it with the passion that I had for Transit. With a single word, I would describe Die Rise as simply unappetizing. It's a map that isn't quite technically as bad as Transit, but has so few interesting features and just so little of anything, I'm genuinely hard-pressed to really feel a whole lot of anything towards Die Rise. Plain and simple, it's just kind of bland. It looks bland, it plays slow, and really has very little to offer in terms of innovation or storyline. Die Rise brought the trample steam and Sliquifier, but really failed to deliver with anything new and exciting beyond that. Co-op is generally a chore, and solo, as the best way to play it, also isn't really anything that special. Having less to offer than even Moon, it feels more like a Black Ops 1 map than a fully fleshed out Black Ops 2 map. Which is shocking, because on one side of Die Rise you have Transit, and while a failure, it was at least an impressive risk that the developers took. And then on the other hand of the Transit crew, we have Buried, which took less big risks, but introduced tons of small new features and was overall a huge success. And while those two maps had very different outcomes, I think they both stand above Die Rise because they at least tried to innovate. But with the Transit crew trio, Die Rise just kind of feels like the forgettable middle child. So let's dive a little deeper. The cornerstone feature of Die Rise is Verticality. Where Transit found expansiveness through lateral space, Die Rise actually plays on a similar concept, but with height. Where Transit uses a bus to move you around, Die Rise uses elevators. And even in just that alone, we already see how Die Rise is just less impressive. Developmentally, their core feature uses a similar concept, but the bus achieves a much greater feeling of expansiveness than sitting in a grayish-brown elevator shaft looking at nothing. And the problem is worse than just the movement system, as there's a lot of time where you simply don't even feel the height. Transit always feels big. But a lot of Die Rise is just enclosed space, and the places where there are ledges to look off and see that height are not really in high trafficked areas. It just feels like if you wanted to make a map feel tall, you should have more views, like everywhere. And those views shouldn't be obstructed. It just feels like Die Rise doesn't even come close to hitting its main goal. And so just from an atmospheric perspective, straight out the gates, Die Rise fails to achieve its primary function. 70% or more of the map is just enclosed boxes that happen to be significantly above and below each other. The feeling of height and verticality is simply not taken advantage of enough, and I think this is where Die Rise already starts to fall apart. But not only does it fail its original goal, I think it also impedes gameplay. The elevators on Die Rise are a huge problem. See, for the second time in a row, we are forced to wait for an uncontrollable game mechanic. I just don't even understand how they didn't learn the lesson from Transit. And while the bus was annoying, at least you had the choice to take it. On Die Rise, players are forced to wait for elevators in order to progress. No choices. Same goes for perks, pack-a-punch, it's just boring downtime, which adds nothing to the map. And what is only more infuriating is that they almost nailed it. There is a buildable on the map, the elevator key. You insert it into an elevator and it makes it come straight to you. Yet sadly, it's a single-use item. So realistically, this could have prevented one of the biggest problems on the map, but instead it just serves as another oversight of the map's development. But of course, it's still worse than that. While traversing down the map is a generally simple process, at times it almost feels too easy. From spawn, you can make it to power or the box by only opening a single door. If you choose to play in this fast-paced playstyle, you really receive no feeling of accomplishment, and you gain access to everything far too quickly. With or without the use of the bank, it makes for an overly fast and easy game progression that just kind of ends up feeling boring. I will say though, the flow of the map is not entirely bad, and in some ways is actually quite smart. If you're not playing with reckless abandonment, the map can do a good job of controlling movement. Because you can't move backwards, it makes you stay in an area until you're absolutely certain you want to progress, and through this actually achieves the same effect as a viable door. The problem is that once you've opened everything, there's never anything you can add to the map to later fix the backwards problem. Once you've gone through that route and everything is open, there's nothing stopping you from getting back anywhere. You just have to sacrifice time, which is again, annoying. And I don't really think the trample steam is enough to fix this. The trample steam will help you traverse some locations, but overall it's really not enough. I think maybe trample steam should have been permanent placements and they could have worked something like wonder spheres, but really there's just not enough places where they work to make up for this huge issue. There's also smaller things that impede this map. There's no way to mitigate fall damage, and to this day, I still don't trust that the elevator shaft will not randomly kill me. I don't know if it's buggy or glitchy, but I have died unfairly from this many times. And then obviously you've got the PhD troll. And I mean, understanding that this is a game which likes to troll you, I'm actually pretty unforgiving about the PhD tees. It's like they tried to laugh at us, but ultimately by not making it accessible, it only made their shortcomings of the map more obvious. And also the mystery box has one of the worst layouts of any map ever. 3 locations. You got the main spawn, which is fine, but then you've got the other 2, which are so illogically laid out. This map seriously makes me want to drink. No, wait, wrong map. So one of the box spawns is located a mere feet away from the first spawn. Yet in order to get there, you have to move around the entire map again. Wait for the elevators, traverse all the way back down. It's just boring. Then there's the rooftop spot, a tiny, insignificant corner with no purpose, and it's quite expensive to leave. The box spawns on Die Rise are so bad, I can hardly even be bothered to hit it, knowing that the AN-94 exists. Speaking of which, Die Rise is actually the first map in zombies history with good wall weapons. And this would actually go on to start a real trend in zombies. And while I loved it at the time, looking back, I'm ultimately torn on it. You've got the PDW, which is a fantastic point SMG, the SMU, a super fun sniper, and the legendary AN-94. The first 2 are actually perfect. The PDW is great for early game, but there are much better weapons still in the box. The SVU is really fun and useful, but not quite as good as the DSR. But the AN-94 has no business being on the wall. It's basically Black Ops 2's version of the Galil, and as much as I love it, I would have preferred to see something not quite as god tier replace it, like the MTAR or the M27. It really just undermines the usefulness of the box. And it's actually this implementation that would ultimately lead to Black Ops 3's decision to nerf the box by making almost every wall weapon amazing. But that whole idea is for another video. Die Rise also looks pretty bad. Now, credit where credit is due, the rooftop is the most gorgeous area in all of Black Ops 2. It has a beautiful sunset skyline with nice bright features like the dragon and large buildings in the distance. But that's pretty much it. 90% of the map is basically gray and brown. It's just boring, nothing. And again, the need I remind you is all enclosed. The overall color palette of Die Rise is like vomit, but with a little bit of rainbow added in because the person was eating purple Skittles or something. Bad analogy, but I'm just trying to say it's got pockets of perfection, which is overshadowed by mostly boring areas. The outskirt maps of the view are incredible. Those buildings in the distance, the nice sunny skyline flowing into a meteor-filled starry sky, it is great. And doesn't really make more than 20% of the map. And I think these bad locations are often forgot, but yeah, they still exist. Also, think about all that wasted space. Working up, the very bottom floor with the Sliquifier build is totally useless. There's a whole maze back there that serves no purpose. Same goes for the next floor up. It's basically just an area to turn on power, build the Sliquifier, and then never go back again. Then there's an entire floor, the second top floor, which is completely useless. Like, it could not exist and the map would lose nothing. And really the entire second building where you spawn isn't much better. Now, it does have tons of good training spots, but overall there are more places here you'll just run through and forget about. Weighing in at around 21 Nocturne totons, Die Rise actually is a pretty big map. Oh, and as I mentioned, Die Rise lacks innovation, and this is made nowhere more apparent than the boss rounds, which are literally just a rehash of rehashed Nova Crawlers. I mean, honestly, it just feels like an insult to my intelligence to call these things jumping jacks, as though giving it a new name and the ability to jump makes them something new. Okay, Kino, 5, Moon. It felt old on Moon. We did not need to see these things again. And really, what else does Die Rise have new to offer? It's got an incredibly bland Easter egg that literally doesn't even need to exist, as it serves no progression to the storyline. You could just skip Die Rise, go straight to Buried, and really you'd have a complete understanding of what has happened. Die Rise just doesn't really bring anything new of value to zombies. Oh, wait, that's right, the new perk, Who's Who, which is almost more of a detriment than an actual aid as a perk. So, if you need reminding, when you down with Who's Who, it spawns you with nothing. In solo, you down and are then forced to do miracle trading, and if you survive long enough, you then go back into your player. Down in that sequence, however, and it's a game over. Like what kind of risk reward is that? Sure, yeah, you save quick revive, but does it not seem like a horrible mechanic that you can game over? You're taking a risk that the game will give you a nice spawn, and then you will be able to train with absolutely nothing to survive. It's the only perk that exists in zombies that is actually a detriment. And while in co-op it's less dangerous, it still feels pretty useless. Now, Die Rise did bring in 2 buildables, in fairness. The Trample Steam is pretty fine. I mean, really, it just serves to help you save time, and since map flow is horrible, this will get you back to some locations rather than having to go all the way around. But generally, it takes so long to build that it's not really all that worth it. Building it in solo is just nothing but waiting for elevators. It's a very, very weak process. And so apart from high rounds, the Trample Steam just feels kind of useless. It's certainly a step up from transit buildables, but to me, it just isn't something that really adds enough. It's cool, but not the most helpful. We do, however, at least have the Sliquifier. Honestly, this is the saving grace of Die Rise. The Sliquifier is one of the coolest wonder weapons ever added to zombies. First of all, it looks great. It's wacky and shoots this colorful purple juice, and while maybe isn't the greatest design of all time, I think it really stands out. But more importantly, it's strong. Like, I went to the box floor training area at round 5, and with no perks, I was able to get to round 50 using nothing but this weapon. It's really good, but not completely OP. And that's why I like it. Like, it just fits so perfect with Die Rise. The goop it shoots is slippery to players, so you have to be smart with it or else you can be sent flying off the map. This balances out the crazy powerful nature of it and really shows a glimpse of developmental genius in a map that is otherwise seriously lacking it. The Sliquifier is great and really is one of the only things that holds Die Rise up. I also like the mechanic where if you get 100% accuracy on jumping jack rounds, you get a free perk. It's just annoying that Who's Who has to exist, as I would have preferred to see a nerfed PhD and Stamina Up return instead. God, I'd even take Tombstone over Who's Who. The other thing I admire is just the overall design of the map. I think from an architectural standpoint, Die Rise did manage to be pretty smart. Think about how many places there are where one building can reach the other via the Trample Steam. Architecturally, the map actually has a very intelligent design behind it, but again, its flaws don't really allow for something like this to shine. There is one other significant area where Die Rise actually manages to hit something right. Die Rise is probably one of the best introductory maps to high round attempts and speedrunning. And overall, more than that, it lends itself to many different play styles. While this mainly pertains to solo play, over the last few years, I have found myself enjoying Die Rise because of this. Die Rise provides players with high-round camping and training strategies, and this is what makes it so excellent. There's not really any map before Die Rise where getting to round 50 is as easy but helpful. You could train in the Speed Cola elevator room below the SVU, or in the classic room next to the box, or even down in the Buddha room. And what's even better is all of these locations provide their own benefits and unique styles. The SVU spot is a tighter banana loop which provides fast gameplay. The iconic box location area gives a more figure 8 style train strategy, but still requires lots of focus. And the Buddha room is a slower circle-like strategy which is best for beginners. Pair this fantastic wonder weapon with guaranteed max ammos every 5 rounds, and round 50 on this map is really nothing. Or perhaps you're into camping or speedrunning. Well, there's a really easy strategy here that involves camping in the Galvan Knuckle elevator shaft. There are only 2 spawns here, so zombies come incredibly fast, and you can make it to round 50 in an hour if you're quick. There's also tons of other places to camp if you desire. And so while I don't have a lot of good things to say about Die Rise, it does this really well. There are so many ways to play it, and I wish more maps could boast this. It's an easy map that provides players with everything they need to build confidence and work on expanding that zombies toolkit. And I've really had some great times trying all these various strategies. And so to finish this video up, I want to take it back to my first analogy of Black Ops 2. Every single map serves a purpose. While Die Rise doesn't hit much right, it does at least add something to the whole game that without it, Black Ops 2 would be less. Think about Black Ops 1 or 3 for a second and ask yourself, can the same thing be said? While it would be missing a good map, Black Ops 1 wouldn't look a whole lot different without Ascension or Shangri-La. There would still be an easy training map, a cool Easter egg, or a tight, challenging experience from Kino 5 and Moon. I mean, even take away Gorog Krovi from Black Ops 3. Radical, I know, and while you do lose a really good map, Black Ops 3 as a whole isn't all that less complete. Sure, again, a great map is gone, but you've got 3 other giant quest maps with those characters, deep storyline, and neat Easter eggs. But as I've said, every single Black Ops 2 map provides something different. And while Die Rise is about as good as its pun is funny, I can honestly say Black Ops 2 wouldn't be the same without it. Still, however, it's not a good map. And in fact, I think it's one of the worst maps we've ever seen in zombies. It saw very little innovation or storyline progression, and worst of all, its main feature of verticality is hardly taken advantage of in any positive way, and it really only serves as a hindrance to game flow. While there are many interesting strategies, I don't think that this alone provides enough to make up for the numerous flaws that exist. I think it's certainly possible to find enjoyment from Die Rise, but it takes a lot of patience and efforts, and you shouldn't have to force your enjoyment for a map to be good. Die Rise aimed high, but in the end, fell flat on its face. My final rating for Die Rise is a 4.1 out of 10.